Hello, my name is Jay Carpenter. I am founder of StarChain, and it is 7 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday, October the 1st, 2024. And this is our weekly session for the StarChain community, where we talk about various dimensions of the project and we look at some developments and some updates and so forth. So this evening, we're going to be talking about sort of the start of a set of series on the models of StarChain and operations of StarChain. So there will probably be a couple folks tuning in as we move along, but I'm going to go ahead and get the presentation started and do a little screen sharing and talk about some of the basics of StarChain. How does it operate? How is it structured and so forth? So this is sort of a general introduction. Hello, Serge. Welcome.
Hello, Jay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. Perfect.
Great.
Thanks. So I'm just starting the presentation here. But this is the start of a set of series that we'll probably focus on for the next few weeks on the models of StarChain and the operations and so forth. This is sort of an overall introduction, but it's intended to be somewhat of a basic introduction, but the idea is to keep it as minimal as possible and keep it as, let's call it Swiss neutral as possible, so that all people from all over the world with all worldviews can basically have a common ground, a common footing. And even if they have different worldviews in other realms, at least in this model, they can agree on how this operates, what it is, and they can verify what it is and how it's operating, most importantly, themselves. So the 0 day or the zero starting point is basically two what I call registry, a header and a footer. And in this case, it's 15 zeros that are surrounded by asterisks, which is the star of a star chain, and then 64 zeros, and I'll show this in detail in a moment, which is sort of a placeholder for a SHA-256 hash or some other type of hash at this point. And then the very end of the star chain is 15 nines, and again, surrounded by two asterisks, and then 64 zeros, at least for the very starting point. And I've labeled this is a universally agreeable number set for a starting point or a genesis point. And the meaning of that is I can't think of anybody that would disagree or could, have some sort of opinion about zeros and nines, basically. Excuse me. And, the asterisk symbol. Now, you might disagree with the schema of this or other parts of it, but this is designed to be, okay, here's a point that everybody can agree about and everybody can trust, and we can start from here. And by the way, there is one of the entries on the Stellar blockchain models this very starting point. So again, here is what I'm calling the registry header, meaning that this header, this particular series of numbers and symbols, the asterisk, is resident in the registry, and it's resident in the other levels, which we'll talk about later. And then this is the registry footer. And again, this is abbreviated, but these are the two main starting points. And this really has nothing in between, no particular entries for StarChain entries, StarChain links, StarChain identifiers. This is sort of just a beginning foundation, a bucket, if you will. And this is just the footer part of the registry footer fully displayed. So here you can see 15 nines, and then you can see 64 spaces, 64 zeros. And so this is more of like a very beginning point. And to generalize it, the model is that you've got an identifier followed by a delimiter, well, starting with a delimiter, identifier, delimiter, and then a hash. And we'll talk about what the hash is in a bit. And then at the very end, you've got a closing delimiter, which is an asterisk. Excuse me. So the idea is to keep it plain text only, and not JSON, not Markdown, not whatever, just pure plain text. So it's as minimal as possible. And here are some of the objectives that are articulated. So minimal elements, long-term viability. So this is designed so that there's very little, if anything, is likely to change in the future. It has universal scope, meaning, again, these elements, I would say, are pretty much universal. We're not going to go into this for a while, but this also accommodates human-friendly addressing, identifiers, and so forth. But at the same time, and this is really an important point, it's also simultaneously machine-friendly. And that's a big difference from, and those two things are intertwined. So the other part is, as you'll see as we move along, but everything associated with StarChain in this particular scope, in the sort of what I call the center, is designed to be independently verifiable. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well. But the other big point, and I think this is a really understated and underappreciated point, is this is bounded. It's a very large boundary, but it's bounded. And I think that's a really powerful piece to this versus other realms that are unbounded, like DNS and other things like distributed hash tables and so forth. So here is the overall model on day 0. And here I'm highlighting the 3 levels of registrant at the top. So registrant is basically Serge, it's Jay, it's all of us as human beings or companies or institutions or governments or whatever. We're at the top of the stack. Normally you see the top of the stack is the registry. So that sort of signals to me that everybody's subservient to the registry. Here, the registry is subservient and bounded by the registrants, the end users. Then in the middle, you've got the registrar, which we'll talk about the purposes of the registrar in a moment. And then the registry is sort of the foundation of this. And then in between, as this moves forward, there's a set of identifiers and hashes that become the foundation for services, for identity, for security, for privacy, and the other goals of StarChain. So this again is we're going back to day 0, and all 3 levels have the exact same configuration of 15 zeros, 64 zeros, 15 nines, and then 64 zeros. And this becomes a level setting starting point. And you can see this on the Stellar mainnet by going to this link and pulling up this interplanetary file system IPFS content ID or content CID. So this is has been logged on the Stellar blockchain, and as far as I can tell, or any of us can tell, this is a permanent entry. Here is the a gateway that you can use to put in the IPFS content ID, and go see the full day zero StarChain entry. And then this is the StarChain, which is a Stellar Block Explorer, and you can you can pull up the value that's highlighted in blue, which is a base 64 encoding of a bit.ly address, and then you can pull up the same information. So after the very beginning day, a new entry is put in, which is a hash, a SHA-256 hash of the public and private keys that are basically associated with the starting point. And to some degree, these are placeholders. But this is the hash, and this hashing becomes very important as this moves forward. Here are the actual public keys, and if you combine these two keys into a file with no space in between the two keys, excuse me, and do a hash of that, you should come up with the same exact hash. So again, this is the starting point hash, and this key set becomes the sort of the default public-private key pair for the duration of the chain. And that key pair can be swapped out as time moves forward by the registrars. Excuse me, but not the registry. The registry is subservient to the registrants and registrars. Excuse me, just a moment. So this is the overall diagram of the three levels. And obviously this is patterned after the domain name system, and actually other systems like the toll-free telephone number database follows this similar convention, and I think there's good reasons for that. But the important part of this diagram is it shows that there are two options for a registrant, at least. A registrant can basically connect with and work with a registrar that has multiple registrants that they serve, similar to how we register domain names with registrars like GoDaddy and Network Solutions and Namecheap and things like that. However, in this model, a registrant can fairly easily become their own registrar and interface with the registry. And some of the policies and so forth have not been fully detailed or defined on this, but that's the basic idea. So if somebody wants to interact with StarChain and as a registrant, in other words, sort of an end user, and they say, well, I don't want to be tied to a particular service provider, then fine, you can become your own registrar, own service provider. But that does have some pros and cons to it. So overall, to the right, you'll see that the registrant level is designed to be where the choices are made, but also where the responsibility resides. And this is really, really important as well, because there has to be responsibility on the part of the registrant to operate in a way that's compliant with not only the StarChain ecosystem, but other ecosystems that are involved. And then the registrar operates as an agent of authentication and validation, as well as an expert in how the registry works and how to interface with the registry. And the registry itself, I boil down to two things: order and aliveness. And I think those are really, really important. So the combination of these three generalized areas of concern and responsibilities and functions and roles, the three of them dancing together, I think, makes a very powerful construct. So this is just simply sort of a holding list of areas that will be addressed, and this will be added to. Maybe some of these things will be taken out of here as this progresses, but I think it's important for people to see some of the dimensions, some of the depth of this construct, and some of the things that will be discussed and addressed and are key parts of this whole ecosystem working in order to fulfill the desired objectives. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Here's just a reminder of our Zoom sessions, which this is one of them, how you can connect. I would like to bring to your attention the Discord, the StarChain Discord server, where every day, right around 2 o'clock Pacific time, you'll see a new entry. And right now we're in a holding pattern where the entries are pretty much the same. And there's a reason for that. It's because some developments happening in order to automate this. And but it's important to see some activity every day so that you know that this is alive and that we do have a contiguous set of entries into, at this point, just the Stellar blockchain. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to take it off screen share. And yeah, any questions that you have, Serge?
Sorry, sorry, I was on mute. So going back to the slides, there was some areas that I think need more definitions to help me fully understand what it would take to start developing the different pieces of the user interacting with the system, which is, I guess you call it the registrant, right? That would be the user layer.
Correct, the registrant.
And the other layer, the middle layer registrar, what are all of the different possible transactions that it can do? Who can do what transactions? That's my question. And what needs to be built? Do you need a search capability against the registry? So those are the types of questions that I have. What are the actions that occur against this data? And
Okay.
And if if you can define those, that would help me understand better as far as which layer represents what types of actions that you can do with with the system that you're showing us right here, where the registry, I would assume that would be holding the entire data, right? That's the layer that has access to the entire registry, and that's that string that you were showing us, right? The stars chain string.
Yes, this.
This. And how long can this be? What is your vision on that? When does it, um, do we ever get different blocks that we need to go after, or is it all just one long string? How do you define that, Jay?
I envision it to be one long string. I believe that's technically possible. So if you calculate a from 15 zeros to 15 nines, so in other words, you know, I guess I can't highlight here, but let's go back to this point. Yeah, so from 15 nines or 15 zeros to 15 nines, and then with the hash, um, so the hash is not a boundary other than it's a fixed length um, field. That's a quadrillion, let's say, links that are possible with this. And my calculations are that if you had a string this long from 15 zeros with a 64 character associated record or data field associated with them to 15 nines, that would be about 100 petabytes. And that's the boundary, basically. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and so far that you've started this from day one, how long has this string gotten? Can we take a look at that?
Yeah, you can see it. It's basically still at the day zero length, which is the registry footer and the registry header, registry footer. So it's only two links at this point.
And
However,
okay,
I'm building I'm building the automation such that such that uh, additional entries can be made in an more of an automated fashion with less mistakes and some checking and so forth. But to get back to your question on who does what in the registrant, registrar, registry realm, the registrants, that's Serge and Jay and whoever else is participating, they basically determine the first identifier that they would like to use. And the one that's most common would be this 15-digit StarChain identifier that sort of pairs with your existing smartphone telephone number. Now this 15-digit star chain is not a telephone number, but you can match it up to a telephone number. So that's sort of the very basic starting point where a user of StarChain really doesn't have to adopt a brand new, totally different identifier in order to interact with this. But at the same time, there's a whole bunch of what are technically called non-E.164 uh, addresses associated with StarChain that could not be associated with a telephone number. And so all of those are on the table. The what I'll call E.164 associated or paired links to non E.164 links. So that I know that might not be clear at this point, but uh, let me get back to basically this. Okay,
can you
so
describe how I would use it, Jay? Like, let's just say I want to be a user of the system, right? I want to use this. what is my use case and how can I interact with this? How do you envision that happening?
Well, the way I envision it happening is you start with, you select your StarChain identifier that you want to use, um, whether it's, you know, pairs or matches your cell phone number, or it's associated with some sort of phrase. And then the second part is you actually have the ability to, oops, I must have passed it, to
I can
generate your
store a
own.
value. I can basically store a value in that hash, right? That's what
Well,
you're
the hash is going to be associated with a set of cryptographic keys, a public-private key set
okay.
that is either a default public-private key, or it's one that you generate yourself and then you submit to the registrar, who, you know, looks at it and says, okay, this is valid public-private key, and then the registrar submits it to the registry. But, you know, there's two choices that you as a user have. Number one is, what identifier do you want to use under what contexts? Um, just like you have a different email address for various contexts that you operate in, your home address, your business address, maybe some sort of organization address. Same with telephone numbers. This will accommodate the same thing. But so that's one of your choices.
Use
And
my
the
phone and if I had to change my phone number or let's just say I've changed my email address and now I can't revalidate against some sort of a record that I've already submitted from that identifier.
no, actually, you still have resident in, let's say, like the Stellar blockchain, you have the whole history. So this is one of the advantages of this, is when you change your email address or telephone number, this does not erase your history. So you could still go back and see whatever key pair was associated with that identifier whenever you started using it, even if it was for one day. And then whatever data is encrypted with that key pair or associated with that key pair or interactions on that particular day or whatever, that's still available. So that's one of the advantages of this is, you know, when we change our phone number or email address, or we lose an internet domain, all of a sudden, pretty much our whole history is gone. This, at least as it's envisioned now, preserves your history. So even though somebody new has taken over that identifier, the time that Serge used that identifier, Jay used it, still has a record of the cryptographic key pair that was associated with that identifier during a certain time period. Does that make sense?
Yes, but if we're not storing any metadata against the identifier in a database, how do we go back and position that data set with the time associated to the transaction that was done, let's say, a year ago, and now someone else has my identifier, my phone number, say.
Well, because there'll be a non-fungible token associated with your interactions with, when you submit your change of your cryptographic key set, or when you take on an identifier, there will be a non-fungible token that's associated with that, that can be a pointer to a whole world that's associated with these StarChain links. You could have metaverses associated with it. You could have your cooking recipes associated with it, whatever. But part of what you're not seeing, and part of what will be apparent, is how this dances with, at least at the beginning, the Stellar blockchain. Because, you know, there are entries that are being made on a daily basis, uh, that basically serve as a stake in the ground, where a richer data set can be created that's associated with these public private keys. So that's the vision. And it's the other part is it's also associated with both decentralized file systems like IPFS, and it can also, I think, operate with centralized file systems like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or whatever. So it becomes like a pointer, and it's very much like how uh, an internet domain dances with a IPv4 or IPv6 address. That's the essence of it.
Okay, so next question I have is my data and your data stored in the same long string, or is everyone having their own uh, entry
Well, as a registrant,
at the
you
registry level? At the registry level.
that's that the registry is designed to be a container for all the entries that exist on a particular time at a particular time for all the registrants, and then also all the registrars. So yes, the
So, so
the
yes, so everyone's data is at that registry level.
correct. Well, everybody's identifier and then a starting point hash, which represents the public-private key pair. And you know, at the full, uh, there is a final point to the registry, which is 1 quadrillion entries.
Okay.
Okay. What other questions do you have?
Yeah, I think this is great that you're describing it because it's helping me understand, but I still have to fully understand the entire, system as it is being described so I can have a sample data set to be able to, uh, start working the different pieces of this system to be able to work with some real storage values that you have to be able to extract the data at the registry level.
Yeah,
Either me or anyone else that's working on the system to be able to define basically the definition of each transaction. That's the data flow between each of those layers and who has access to what transaction and what parts of it are automated. At what point does the system, you know, uh, I don't know if there's going to be any notifications. This all has to be defined at, you had one slide that was describing all the different, I think, use cases, but I think all of that has to be still, uh, defined further for uh, for us to be able to do any development on this. Currently, the only thing that is out there in the StarChain GitHub right now is just the decoding part right now, where we're able to just decode these values. So I think the different pieces have to be defined well enough, and then all of these different parts of the system that we can develop, we can then combine them into their own different layers. So the layers have to be fully defined, I think, in terms of transactions.
exactly. And I recognize that. And so this is a step-by-step process.
Yes, of
And,
course.
and that's part of the reason for these Tuesday evening sessions that are designed to be, fairly short bits of, here's an introduction. It's sort of like breadcrumbs on a trail. It's like, okay, here's your first breadcrumb. And then we go to the next. And it's a journey, basically. But the so it will unfold. It is unfolding, and there's code and processes that I've been working on that I'll be, rolling out and sharing, that you'll you'll be able to see how the registry grows, how the registrars grow, and how the registrants grow, and how they can interact in a what I consider to be a superior security, privacy, and identity realm than what we currently have. So I appreciate your questions, and I'm glad to hear this added a little bit of light. And I don't expect you to see the entire picture at this point, Serge, but I do appreciate your attention and staying with us, and your participation. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
It's
so
it's really interesting hearing about the different possibilities that this might have. So I'm trying to fully understand the system. Then just to be able to, see the light at the end of the tunnel. Right now, it's very blurry to me at this point, but I want to say I want to understand it because it's something that you don't see every day. It's not just, uh, doing one transaction. There's multiple things involved, and it may have different use cases that I can think of, but I don't know the entire system yet. So I wanna keep listening if you don't mind. Yeah, I
sure.
wanna.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your listening and your participation. But you could think of it like the keys that we hold in our pockets. You know, this is my house key, and yes, it locks and unlocks a door, and that I know which door it unlocks and locks. And when I step inside that door, a whole world opens up. And that's the idea with this. But it's also an identifier because Jay's associated with a certain house on the block. And uh, you know, so there's a dance of security, access, authorization, authentication, but there's also identity because everybody knows where Jay lives, and part of my identity is associated with that location. Um, so I recognize it's not clear at this point, but I I can assure you I've been working on this for a very long time. I've got a lot of material in the background, but now the advantage that you have now is it's actually starting to take definition. It's in existence on the Stellar blockchain. There will be more entries that you can get your arms around. We'll be able to, well, one of the first applications is for me to be able to take your public key and encrypt a message, send it to you, you decrypt it, and take my public key and send a message back. Very simple. And I think we talked about this before, something akin to TLS, handshake. But establishing that trust, that trusted connection is incredibly valuable and opens up entire worlds. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
cool. Okay, well, we're over our time, but I think this is a great discussion. And yeah, stay tuned, and we'll this is coming together really well. I'm really, really pleased with it. And I'm looking forward to sharing more with all of you and giving everybody who's interested, who's looking at this, an opportunity to create something that's yours, that's really, really cool. So, all right. Have a good evening, and tune in next week.
Thank you, Jay. You too. Have a good
Bye.
evening.